On Friday, we commemorated International Women's Day, and we had several guests who joined us, two guests who joined us here to have several conversations. We also saw the president was meeting with the elected governors in the country, and other women were there as well to commemorate just this. And we're talking about, what is happening in terms of women leadership in the country. A few days earlier, we had seen the former Prime Cabinet Secretary, being briefed by the Cabinet Secretary for Gender on what the government is doing, in terms of the gender agenda. And we want to have that conversation this morning. We are joined by Rita Oyier. Rita is a communications specialist and currently serving as the Chief of Staff in the Office of the Governor of Kirinyaga County. Rita, good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
How are you doing?
Good morning, Joe, and good morning, City.
Yes.
I am very fine, thank you.
City, why don't you welcome the Chief of Staff from the Governor's Office with the day's proverb?
That I will. Our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the Republic of Seychelles. It is not worth adding water to the sea.
It is not worth adding water to the sea.
Yes.
Or lake. Or ocean.
Or river.
Or river.
Bathtub, yes.
You can add there. Kwa karai unaweza ongeza. Rita, what's your interpretation of this proverb?
It sounds to me like what boys say when they go to the coast. Don't carry sand to the beach. Go to the beach. There's sufficient sand. It sounds very similar to me, and it doesn't usually come out very well for us women. When your boyfriend says he's not carrying sand to the beach. City,
Yes.
is there a similarity here?
Now that you've asked the question, I have to look for the similarity. But the point is well made. The point is well made.
It is not worth adding water to the sea. The Seychelles have said it. Nisa Sawa.
They are an island nation.
Them, they know water.
They're surrounded by it.
They're surrounded by water. Okay. So, Rita, we want to talk about the gender agenda after the International Women's Day on Friday, but also March is International Women's Month, right? So we continue this conversation. The country has been on this, journey towards fully realizing gender balance in our society, in everything, in all spheres of life. Population, we are balanced. But in terms of opportunities, that's where the issues, the disparities start coming in. Now, of course, you work for the only female governor who's been elected twice by her people. And in fact, the people of Kirinyaga electing somebody for a second time, Kirinyaga City has always told us, it's Kirinyaga people electing you the second time. It's a big thing. We have seen the push, towards this realization of gender balance. You've been there in the conversations for gender. When Kenya Kwanza was campaigning, it had several meetings with several interest groups. One of those interest groups was women. And there was a gender charter that was signed. And it had several commitments by the Kenya Kwanza administration. Among them, 50-50 portfolio balance in cabinet, 30% is it in principal secretaries, and so on and so forth. Where are we from your own perspective?
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for having me in studio today. I think this is where I want to start, with a shareholding conversation. If there is any rightful shareholding conversation that should be had, it is not ethnic, it is gender. Because based on how we campaigned, taking this government as an illustration, women really supported all our candidates. And I would like to welcome any politician who can say that they would have been elected without the support, without actively seeking, mobilizing, and getting the support of women to elect them to office. And the president, being politician number one, hustler number one, confessed the other day, some of his fiercest, most courageous generals were women. And the highest number of votes he got was from women. And I think he was pleasantly surprised because during campaigns we had a bit of engagement. And that confidence was there, but I don't think anyone predicted the translation of it. So based on that, the highest shareholders of this government are women. But that does not reflect in the numbers, both elective and nominated. It hasn't reflected yet, despite the promises. And I know there's usually a lot of goodwill when the party leaders make these promises during campaigns. There's a lot of goodwill. And I'm glad that the promises can be documented, even in the Women's Charter. We have made quite a bit of progress in terms of those appointed positions. For example, cabinet is one of my favorite, whereas, and the numbers are very, it depends on what you're looking at as the denominator.
Is it cabinet or is it people who are close to cabinet?
Exactly. But even if we just take the hard numbers of cabinet, we are at 31%. 7 women. It's not very bad. If we add the secretary to the cabinet, though some of my friends keep reminding me she's not a member, she's a secretary to the cabinet. But then we get past the 33%. With the PSs, we have made substantive progress as well because we are above 23%. But 23% is not 33%. So we have 10% to go. With elective offices, which usually breaks my heart, we are at 10%. So when we start these conversations, and every time I say it or anyone says it, the first response is, poor boy child. What are we going to do about the boy child? My goodness, you're still at 90%. We are only 10. Even if we make, because if you look at the elections of the gender between 2013, 2017, 2022, we were at 7%, we went to 9%, we are at 10%. Even if we gave it our best shot in 2027.
12.
Because it's a 2% increment, but now because we are doing more and we have the goodwill of the president, we are hoping to get to 20%, which is still not 33%. So if the first response I get from my friends, colleagues, politicians is, they're already in panic mode.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is the shareholding conversation should be had, but it should be had for women and for gender, not just for the ethnic. And I'm not sure about the ethnic, but for the gender, we must have it. We must have the women shareholders being represented and taking part in governance in this country.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're demanding 50%?
I'm not demanding.
You're strongly advocating for 50%.
I'm saying it's the right thing to do.
Right.
It's the only thing to do, 50%. Even the 33% conversation, if anyone asked me, 50%.
Why do you think we are not at, City? Why do you think we're not at that 40%, 50%, 60%?
One is because the system is not devoid of people. People are very much part of the political system when designing it, when implementing it, when resourcing it. And for a long time, after independence, these people have been men. Men have designed our politics in such a way that it is more familiar to have a man leader than a woman leader in very many senses. And that has affected what we view leadership as. The first question someone will ask you when you tell them we need 50% women, they will tell you gender is not a qualification for leadership. We want capacity. Are they able? I don't remember people actually asking very many men to prove themselves before they get elected. What then gets to me in this 50-50 conversation is how do you trust women to bear children, including yourselves as men, to take care of you health-wise, to nurture and give you nutrition in the kitchen, but then when it comes to leadership, you want them to prove themselves first. So one, it's a concept of how the system was designed, who designed the system, and now these new requirements for women leaders before they get in, which are not necessarily the barriers for the men. Prove yourself first. Okay, where will I prove myself if you don't give me a chance? And then incumbents. Proof of leadership sometimes is you have done it. Most of the you have done it people are men. Women have very little to demonstrate because they've not been given a chance, because it's kind of like a chicken and egg situation. So then the call that would help us break that barrier and get us there is get the women in, which is the principle of nomination. Get the women in.
Rita, can I ask a question?
Yes.
These men that we speak of and the advantages they have, the advantages exist.
Yes.
In a male-dominated society, the advantage will be skewed in the direction of men. But in the political arena, the gifts that you allude to, when what I see is competition. A lot of it. I may not like the manner in which that competition is held, but people compete, whether it's within political parties, whether it is political parties against political parties. I see competition.
City. What is the question? You see competition, we all see competition.
Yes.
What is the question?
No, the question is, what combination of events and process do you want us to follow to bring about this much needed equality? That's really what I'm asking.
First, it's equity first, before we go to equality. Equity means, when you say it's a competition, we see the start line and the finish line.
Yes.
In between, there are hurdles that could be visible or invisible. I will start running, like you heard Governor says, when we stand on a ladder, someone is putting their hand up my skirt. No one is putting a hand up your skirt. When it comes to at midnight, you'll be in a meeting. I have to be at home with my husband and my children. That's a hurdle. It's invisible to you. And sometimes the privilege of being a man is that you actually don't see it as privilege. So there are invisible hurdles and barriers for women. And there are visible hurdles. We can't just say we started at the same time, you went to the same school, you have 1 million bob, I have 1 million bob, that's the finish line. Let's get there. And whoever gets there first is the winner. Equity dictates that while we are designing the political process, we have to look at all the barriers in between and see how to make it less for someone, or to give a shorter person like me a small ladder to climb up so that I'm also able to be seen. And I'll even tell you one of the most invisible barriers. It's the media. Sorry to say.
Why do you apologize if it's the truth?
It's the media. And research has shown, in fact, including the one that was published by Aga Khan University the other day, women will be covered on print very nicely, but they will never be on the headline. Headlines is what dictates the mood of the country, the pace of the conversation, and the urgency of the conversation. It will be 3% for a woman to be on the headline. And that would be the Governor Waiguru has said we are shutting down counties because you've not given us money. Now the media can give us a headline. But until then, 3%, you can imagine, it will be men. Secondly, television, the second barrier. Every other time television covers women, they cover the more negative stories, not the positive ones. Unlike print, which would do very in-depth studies on women. TV, which is very influential, will cover the negative stories. So these invisible barriers might not be we're not the same. We don't come from the same place. The society...
We don't what?
Sorry?
We don't come from the same place.
Yes, we do not come from the same place.
We do. And this place we come from is where the biases begin. In our homes. You see, I mentioned the word competition for a simple reason. All competitions have rules. And if you don't understand the rules, then you will not compete well. If you begin, as you say, from a position of disadvantage and you acknowledge it is good, that's your starting point. You know your disadvantage. So the question then is, what do you do to make this thing level? Because you will not be able to play if there is no level playing field. If indeed you want to play and you hope that the person whom, as you say, has been responsible for making it an even will do something about it, they won't. So your disadvantage will continue. And then you want to also ask the question, what about those of us who, by whatever reason, have managed to be in positions of authority? What are they doing to champion this cause? Because they're already there. They will be blamed. And all manner of things. And as you correctly put it, the negative ones will come to the fore. Again, reality of the competition you've decided to get into. The strategy of overcoming them. We even have a constitution that tells people this is what you must do. There must be this balance. Every time that matter comes up in Parliament, people are either absent or there's no quorum or there's no what. You couldn't ask for a clearer indication that the people who are in that parliament have no intention whatsoever of ever bringing this to the fore.
City, you're a very good ally. One, even when you had the president, or rather in the G7 conversation, for example, where we said, we have seen women governors are doing very well in delivering the promise of devolution. Why don't we have a strategy to increase the number of women governors? This, by the way, at governor level is tier 4 politics. We still have tier 1, we still have tier 2, we still have tier 3. At governor level is tier 4 in terms of political leadership. And when we say that, panic mode. Then the men say, we have had you, and they start congratulating themselves, what we call premature congratulations. We have had you, thanks for bringing this to our attention, we are working on it. They're trying to save you from yourself. So you have said, we have had, allow us to work on it. We are putting it together, we'll arrange huko mbele, tutawapatia. Again, if this thing is going to parliament is already 90% male. I can tell you for sure, even our county assemblies, I laugh because this is where the women are most known for their effort, for their work. Nyandarua has one elected MCA, Milka. Taita Taveta, one elected MCA, Dorcas. How do you explain this? Until we have the women in that parliament, 30% voting, then we even say if the men absent themselves, like you're saying, they abscond, at least these women will come in and vote for this thing. That's why I was saying it's a chicken and egg situation.
Okay.
We have to be in the room.
Let me ask about the chicken.
Yes.
Okay. So we are starting from the process of getting into this contest.
Yes.
Right? Let's talk about elective politics. The process of getting into the contest. Out of the 1,000, how many?
1,900.
No. 18,000 candidates. Was it 18,000 candidates that we had in the last election?
Somewhere.
For all the seats,
yes,
right?
Somewhere around there.
What was the percentage of women candidates?
I think it was about 7%.
So 7%.
Because I remember we talked about it on this show.
Why was it 7%?
Political parties.
Why?
How do you get elected if your political party has not pipelined you into the system? Unless you go in as an independent. Okay. So that is why one of the things that the NADCO recommends with this 2/3 gender rule is to have political parties be obligated to meet the 2/3 in their party list first. And if I was to add, I haven't read if there's any penalty, I would actually tie this to the political party funds. If you don't meet 2/3 gender rule, there's a penalty to the money we give you.
But there was something like that was deployed in the last election, where political parties were told you have to see a 30% representation in all your candidates across.
There was a lot of protests, including in my party.
But
there was
it
a
was
lot
there.
It was there.
The IEBC placed that as a condition.
But there was a lot of protest.
Political parties, you must do this. So it was not 7%. Because of IEBC's insistence, that percentage rose.
There was a huge protest, Eric.
Yes.
But
because of IEBC's insistence, that percentage cannot have been 7%.
It was 7%.
It was more. It must have been higher than 7% because of IEBC's insistence.
Okay.
Now, second thing, you've talked about, once you get into the system, there are all these visible and invisible barriers. Okay? You say the way when a woman is campaigning, how she's treated. When a woman is getting into campaigns, the number of things that she's got to balance, the time that she puts into campaigning, the number of hours that she's got to put into this. Those are all barriers.
And even how she's covered by media.
And how she's even covered by media. Okay? And that's what City is asking, what is their strategy for dealing with this?
So,
is there any specific recommendation that has been made to say, because a woman will not be able to campaign 18 hours a day, because when a woman goes to a podium, she is likely to get this kind of biases and this and the other. This is what we'd like to see in the electoral system.
Yep.
That supports this woman. And not just woman, that also supports a person with disability, that supports such. So, is there any specific, apart from just saying,
So I can say two things that I see. One is the opposite gender rule for offices like, say, the governor or other executive offices. It means once a woman is in that ticket, then she doesn't have to fight those barriers as hard. She can be the principal or the running mate. It doesn't matter. But once the ticket is secured and given by the party, then some of those barriers are overcome with the pairing. Then secondly, in this proposal, there's a fund that has been proposed. The women, I hope they're not calling it Women Empowerment Fund, but it's political, kind of like Women Political Empowerment Fund. It's one of the proposals in the NADCO 2/3 gender bill. And the third thing, which is what
will it do?
It will be given to the parties, and they will use that to support the women. So, for example, if my barrier is resources, then I should be able to draw from that fund. If it is security, if it is media coverage, because it's a fund for the party, then the party, and this is what gendered programming looks like. You have to look at what is the barrier for my people, and therefore, how do I support with resources? Then the party will have to say, we have candidates in this area. This is their barriers that they have to face. Therefore, let's resource them to reduce the barrier. That is what gendered planning actually is, gender-lensed planning is. Okay. And we hope they will be able to do that. And finally, like the G7, which has the ambition of getting 24 women governors, we actually have one of the strategic pillars as mentorship. Because if Governor Waiguru or Governor Susan tells you how they overcame a certain hurdle, then you don't have to go through the same hoops to get there. So the issue of mentorship among political women leaders is also being fronted very strongly. And like you hear our people say, sometimes your mentorship can even come from the men. They can tell you how to navigate, especially resource-wise. They can tell you how to navigate certain things. So those 3-4 things is what I see that have been strategically placed, and I hope they'll be able to be implemented so that we get more women overcoming those hurdles.
Rita Oyier is a communication strategist. She's also the chief of staff in the office of the governor of Kirinyaga County. She's here because we are having a conversation about the gender agenda. How do we realize this 2/3 gender rule? How do we get to that? What has been proposed now by the party leader of UDA, the president of the republic, that for UDA, next future elections, I don't know whether future starts the next election or future elections, if candidate is of one gender, then running mate will be of the opposite gender. How do we get there? How do we drive ourselves to that position? Ndu?
So, I think as we look at all of this and we talk about the different intrigues that we see, just looking at Parliament, for example, and the 2/3 gender rule, that 2/3 gender representation that seems to have never gotten through. We had, Chief Justice Emeritus saying that Parliament should be disbanded just because of that. Everybody recalled go home just because of that. But it seems that over and over again, like CT has pointed out, quorum was an issue. There seems to be a reason why we cannot sit down and have this conversation. We cannot sit down and push for this representation. There's always a reason. And that points to my question is, then what is the reason? When we see more men elected than women, or if we flip it and we say we see less women elected than men, across the board, doesn't matter, your lowest form of representation to the very highest. Why is that? Do we see the less women being, or that a woman will not be elected because she's a woman? Or do we see that election takes place and people are actually choosing the person that they feel will do a better job, the gender card not being played here at all? So if we see that there's less representation of women in elective positions, why are people then not electing women? And is it purely a capacity thing, or do we play the gender card here?
So I really wish the statistics were better anywhere in the world. You would imagine even countries that consider themselves first world are still at less than 30% of elected women in their offices. In Africa, in fact, some African countries do better than them. The issue is not the capacity of women. The issue is that our brothers have refused, and even our sisters, some of them, because sometimes your biggest point of pain will be a fellow sister, have refused to work with their imagination and the aspiration of our various constitutions. We are still so held back by what we are comfortable and familiar with, which is, I need a leader. I need that guy who will provide for me, that guy who will show me the way, the way men have designed this leadership thing. They're the ones who, guidance. A woman should be under a man to be given guidance. A man should provide for. So women are always looking from the lens of which is my strongest support system when I need security, protection, provision, reproduction. And usually that is very skewed to the male. It's a design issue. And because it was designed by men, this is how it plays out. You can't design a thing to run and then now you want it to swim. So it was designed to run this way. And that is why, just a minute, City, and that is why we have to be more intentional, more imaginative, and work more with our aspirations. Countries like Tanzania, I do not know if they could have imagined, they could have created a Suluhu and made her president and seen what she can do. Counties like Homa Bay and the wider Nyanza, I do not think they could have conceived Awanga until they saw Awanga in action. Now I don't think you can take them back to Anawiti. You understand? I don't think you can take TZ back because it has been demonstrated. They have seen it. They have experienced it. Now they cannot go back. Countries like Kirinyaga, I do not know how you could have, after the former governor who was there, I do not know how you could have imagined or conceptualized a Waiguru until you saw a Waiguru in action.
So there's a case for affirmative action here,
yes,
whereby you almost force a situation in order for you to see the benefits of it. Is that what you're saying?
You have to break the thing. You have to break the thing and insert. It's like DNA. Break the thing, insert the code you want, then let the code perform, and the people their imagination will be improved. You get? You cannot theorize this. It's practical.
But I agree with you to a certain extent in terms of I'm a huge advocate for affirmative action, for the 47 women seats, for those. And for me, it's because what it does is it encourages women to put themselves out there so that they can be seen. The people of Homa Bay were not coerced or forced or pushed or even made to by law to vote for Gladys Wanga. They were not, but they'd seen her. They'd seen her in action. So when she was coming to campaign and saying, I can do this one, two, three, or the other, they already had a relationship with Gladys Wanga, similar to the people of Kirinyaga County, similar to the people of Kitui with Charity Ngilu before, similar to the people of Nakuru now, or Machakos. They've seen these women before. They're electing women because they've seen them. And also because these women have put themselves out there to be elected. I do not really 100% agree that the people of Kenya are not ready to elect women. They've been electing women. And you go across the country, we talk about, there's a very patriarchal system, a very patriarchal society. Mount Kenya people are patriarchal society. Kirinyaga has had how many women candidates for governor? In all the elections since 2017, the main candidates have been women. Homa Bay has had a woman candidate. Homa Bay has had women going for MP position. Nakuru has 2 elected members of parliament who are women, a governor who's a woman rep, of course, who's a woman.
Eric,
go across the country.
Eric.
This whole patriarchy story, I don't think people in the country have a problem really saying that we will elect so-and-so because she's a woman.
Eric.
Actually, we do have a problem.
Yes, we do. But City, thank you.
Demonstrate.
But the problem is demonstrated at the ballot. I do not believe that anyone who sits down and says, in the new constitution, we can only elect 10% of all elected leaders. And even now, with this proposal,
people go to the ballot not to elect a percentage.
No, they go
choose from the candidates that are before them.
If the results, that's what I'm saying, it's the results that prove how people think. It is not how many offered themselves. It's how we made our decisions collectively. But my point is, this cannot be theorized. We have to have women through the parties, on the ballot, and then in the offices, so that the proof of concept continues to be self-fulfilling.
On that one,
and
100%.
Therefore, even the nomination, the affirmative action of nomination, is part of the pipeline. That you get women in leadership positions at whatever level, they prove themselves, they build their network, they build their resources, and they go into elected. In fact, if there's anything that I'm really against as an individual, and I need to really campaign against this, is women who get nominated forever.
Yep.
It is supposed to be a platform and a springboard for you to get known, get surfaced, do your network, and then go for elective. And you leave room for the next person.
Agreement.
Because
which
if you don't
you're
do
actually
that,
saying the same thing I'm saying.
Yeah.
If we ensure that political parties do what you're saying, all right?
Yeah.
Make sure that you mentor and encourage more women to join elective politics. Make sure that you encourage, because women are participating in politics. You call for a meeting, women are the ones who will attend those meetings. But how many women are actually putting themselves out for nomination? Why they feel all these barriers are present. If political parties are made to remove these barriers and encourage more women to come into the fold, to present themselves as candidates, and to support them to get onto the ballot, the people of Kenya will elect women.
I agree with you. Therefore, the responsibility here is twofold. One, that parties nominate women who have intention to run for elective offices. Don't nominate a woman who doesn't have the intention to ever be elected. That's not the purpose for the office. Then don't nominate a woman year in, year out. Then it means the affirmative action is not affirming them enough.
Yeah, it's
they don't
useless.
have the confidence to present themselves for elective office. And then they choke the pipeline. So between 2013 to date, you've been nominating the same woman rep. That could have been an opportunity to affirm 3 other women who've missed out on the opportunity because this person is in a perpetual, permanent affirmative state.
Yep.
So the political parties do have a responsibility, and they need to critically evaluate who they nominate and the end game for this person. If someone doesn't want to be elected, don't nominate. Leave them out. It doesn't matter what they did for your party. Leave them out. Because the nomination has a purpose. Then also give women a chance. There's something we call equity to meritocracy. That if there are these hurdles, don't say merit first, prove first. There's no platform for us to prove. Allow us in through equity, whatever our disadvantage, support us, let us get in. If we don't prove ourselves, if we don't merit after we have been allowed in, drop us, but give us the chance. Let us have an equitable society, not where men say, you have the same constitution, we are mobilizing the same people.
Same platforms.
To the privilege of men, we are the same. The reality is, we are not the same.
How is it then that we don't have this discussion when we're referring to education?
In terms of equity?
This education, this affirmative action education, because when you're talking of leadership in this country, I'm going back to basics. There was a time when girls were not allowed to go to school. Parents wouldn't. That has changed over time. Girls go to school the same way boys go to school. They go to university, they go to colleges, and then they enter the employment sector. And then other realities come in because it was male dominated. And for a woman to rise, she had to do infinitely more than men had to do in order to rise. But then over time, employers realize that women make better employees. They work harder. If you see a woman in leadership, chances are she has done infinitely more than any man who has ever held that position. Now, for me, if you ask me, that is enhancing skills. So you find women then acquire abilities that many men don't. So they have an advantage when it comes to competition if they're allowed to have it fair. East African Breweries is mentioned as one of those companies, not just in Kenya, but on the planet and on the continent with the highest ratio of women in leadership. Ratio of men to women. It's around 45. How did they arrive at this? Their CEO is a lady. Again, when people hear it's unheard of, you see, what we are calling patriarchy, what we are calling that gender bias, is all those, but there's just a little concept here. The issue of dealing with something we are not accustomed to, breaking the barriers so that there's something new that we are not accustomed to. It's not just on gender issues. If you introduce a concept that we are not familiar with, it's going to take time before we wrap it around our heads. Now, when you come to politics, politics has to be looked at differently. Differently in this sense. It's because what politics represents so much for us, and there's so much vested in it, that everything around it is larger than life. There's nothing that you can look at in politics and say, well, this is normal in everyday life. There's hardly anything that is normal about politics in everyday life. And so, back to what I was saying earlier on, so when someone wants to involve themselves in politics, you first of all want to understand how the game is played at the party level. All these things, if you don't, you will be left standing. Now, the key to what I'm saying is this. The biggest support that women need in order to be able to navigate this. Obviously, people say it's other women, but actually it isn't, it's men. You need to have a very serious support base of men. Very serious. Now, how do you get the men to support you and to feel this is by far the best candidate that we can have?
Switchy, these are some of the discussions I have, and people don't like me very much once I say them. Women have to support women first, because relying on men to support women, to affirm women, to place women. Now we have said we want governors and we want opposite gender. They have said watatupangia alafu watu waone vile wanatuingiza. Look, if men wanted to support women, they have had over 60 years in Kenya and over 4 decades in the US. Men have to decide for themselves. Why is it the women's burden? It's the same thing in relationships. Do this, do that, so that this person is... The world is not only about you. If men want to support women, these are your mothers, these are your daughters, they've nurtured you, they've birthed you. You should know the value of women. I don't have to keep preaching to you. If you don't know it by now, it has been 60 years, you've never seen it. In fact, it's okay. It's okay.
I'm not talking about anything else.
How you do one thing is how you do everything.
Actually, no.
And, City, that is my pitch. And then you can tell me yours. How you do one thing is how you do everything. If men do not value a woman, her mind, her body, her heart, her spirit, her resilience, her thriftiness with money, they will not value women in politics. Politics was designed patriarchally.
Yes.
Patriarchally. And what politics, like you have said, it's many things, but for me it boils down to 2 things: resources and power. The 2 things that women do not fight about, resources and power. But it's the thing that men can kill each other for. So by design, politics is not female. Yet, the largest number of participants, like Eric is saying, mobilized women. Do this, women. There's no man who will tell you they were voted without women. But the design of the thing is very androgynous. That's what I'm saying. Rita, it's poorly designed, and that's why I said we have to break something.
Rita,
and this,
if the biggest hindrance to the progress of women in politics is
no,
men,
my friend.
You said no before I even finished my sentence.
Because you want us to do that thing we do in relationships,
no.
which is treat him nice, do this, be submissive.
No.
We do not want to preach to men. Okay,
Rita,
rather, I'm speaking for myself.
Rita, if you listen to what I was saying, you might be able to respond better. That is not what I am saying. I am saying you have a group of people who are clearly a hindrance to your progress.
Yes.
When I say get the support, I'm not saying ask men to run after you and cheer you. This is an enemy. How well do you understand this enemy? How well do you deal with this enemy? How do you get this enemy to turn around? Now, that's phase 1. Phase 2,
why is this enemy not persuaded?
This enemy is brought up predominantly in African society by women, not men.
Yes.
So, when you say the support of women, how do mothers treat their boys? How do they bring them up? How do they influence them? The segregation that we see in adult life, hii si ya wanawake, hii ni ya wanaume. Men introduce it. Who entrenches it in our society as Africans? So, when I say that you need to get men to support you. The support isn't the running after cars and cheering and breaking leaves and branches and running around. It isn't that. It's the thinking of how they understand this. And the greatest influence of the way men think is not men, it's women.
City, like I said, the first minute you mentioned the issue of women in elective office. What will men say? Poor boy child. Soon we will not have. And yet I have told you the numbers. Unajua politics ni hesabu. We are at 10% of elected people. My question to you, and I know I am the guest, not the host. Why are men not persuaded? You have given the pitch very correctly. They're brought up by women. They are taught by women. So if anyone should know the value of a woman, both intellectually, emotionally, financially, resource-wise, it is a man, because they're sons. They know what their wives do for them. They know how many times. How is it that men...
this bias. That's what I'm saying.
How is it that men... Again, the burden is so much the woman's. From entrenching biases to persuasion, it is still our job.
Can we flip this a little bit?
Yes.
What
and
is it that the men are doing actually?
Let's ask the question separately, because I think I may see where City might be going with this, and I think this question is very clear here. That it has often also been seen that a great hurdle towards the development of women has been women themselves. One. Two, if
there's no data to that, sorry.
I said it has been said.
Very anecdotal.
I said it has been said. And the people who say are the people who practice. Note. Okay? Now, when we talk about these biases that then are formed, when we look at things like affirmative action and how women went to school, in most cases, in the very beginning, my mother is an example. Who sent her to school? Her father insisted she goes to school. People started to see, oh, wait a minute, Ndobu's daughter has gone to school, and this is what has happened as a result of that. Because of that, we will now send our daughters to school, because we now see what has happened. My question is this. Are we plainly saying here that make the selection based on the fact that you present this woman in a position where she will do one of two things? She will either succeed at the job that she's been given, or she will fail, like you said. If she fails, then fine, leave her.
Exactly.
But what you're saying now is present that position whereby she has an opportunity to fail or succeed.
Demonstration.
Right?
Yes.
Now, those who can now actually push you to that place, in a lot of cases, in the country where we are today, in many countries, are actually men.
So my question is, City is giving us more work as women. From don't have biases, then go and pitch to men. My question is, why are men not persuaded? And I would want some men to answer this question, not necessarily in this room. Why are men not persuaded?
Can I answer to the question?
With another question?
Yes. The question will in itself present itself as a response. If you look at, say, our parliament, and you look at the men, because it's not all the men in parliament who oppose these things. You will find a certain category of men who will oppose this. And many of them come from extremely male-dominated communities, where the bias against women is so stark naked, you can actually see it running in the dark. Okay? So their entire thinking is biased, and the needle doesn't move. These are people who begin the statement, unajua wanawake, that's an opening statement, meaning they've generalized everything. If it's negative, huyu ni kama mwanamke. Now, there are communities where that thinking is entrenched. And even if you find someone who is supposedly educated to what we think is a university level, the thinking doesn't change. The societal influence is so entrenched, you actually wonder when that will ever happen. Now, there are men who don't think that way. There are many men who will support that affirmative action and will themselves practice it.
Also, there are very many parts of this country where it has been demonstrated that men will elect women. Nairobi County, I've said Machakos County, Kirinyaga County, Homa Bay County, coastal counties, Kisumu.
The first woman MP in this country ever.
So, if we had more candidates in Ukambani, people would have no problem choosing a woman. We have seen. If you had more candidates in Nairobi, people have no problem choosing a woman. If you had more people in Kirinyaga, people would have no problem electing a woman. They have elected them before. As MP, as governor, as
MCA.
We have seen them.
Oh, no.
So you don't need to convince the men of Nairobi to elect a woman. They've elected Bitu Salachi in Goritino. They've elected Bishop Wanjiru in Mathare. They've elected women.
So why is the number so low?
I asked you, when you said 7%, why did we have 7%? Anyway, our time is up.
Our
It's
time
been an
is up.
interesting conversation. Imagine.
Just when we are
Rita
getting to
Oyier is a
yes.
communications strategist. She's the chief of staff in the governor's office at Kirinyaga County. We've been talking about the gender agenda.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.